Hi, welcome to Stories Worth Telling. This is Irving Steele filling in for host Kate Steele, who is busy with work for the next couple of weeks. But today we are super lucky and grateful to have a guest on the show named Jesse. He is practicing in the field of financial advice and really views it more of kind of a service to the community, helping people to have better futures, better present, and everything in between. So Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be on.
So can you tell us a little bit, what's your story with financial arena? How did you get interested in this area? How did you get started? What's your why?
Yeah, so actually probably not the most typical why for wanting to help people and provide advice in an area that it's not really taught in schools or anything like that, but I thought I was going to be a musician when I went to college.
What instrument?
I went to Berkeley to sing.
Oh, wow.
And realized it wasn't really the most practical route. I was nervous about living the artist lifestyle. So I quickly realized I should try and find a practical role. I had a father who was an accountant in Vermont. I grew up in Vermont, and I thought, okay, maybe I can do the family business. And I didn't really like accounting very much, but I'd interned at his firm and was lucky enough to sit in on a scholarship meeting. And there was an attorney and a financial advisor there. And when we got out of the meeting, I said, Dad, what does that guy do? I think I want to do that.
Well, that's cool that just being there at the accounting firm with your father, you're able to be exposed to something that you were really interested in.
Exactly.
Cool.
So one thing led to another, and that's what I did directly out of college. And
how much do you think it was at your father's firm? Was it actually working with your father that was something you didn't like so much? Was it the accounting, both?
I think it's not working with my father part. That would have been lovely, but more so the dynamic of how changing financial advice can be. There are a lot of inputs. Accounting's very rigid. I think that when it comes to financial advice, everybody has a different story, have a different why. Money means something different to everybody else, and it's very emotional. And navigating that is what I think is the most interesting and rewarding part of the job.
That's true. I mean, it's such an emotional element to money and just life in general. So you meet somebody in the financial planning arena. What were the next steps to kind of jump down that path?
So I actually interned while I was still in college at a financial advising firm. Went out to do a pretty extensive training in St. Louis and started a branch in Vermont where I'd grown up.
You started your own branch after the training.
I started my own branch in Vermont.
That takes a lot of risk.
It does, and it was fairly short-lived. I was there a couple of years, and I got an opportunity I couldn't refuse. I went to go consult for a $800 billion asset management firm.
That's a good learning opportunity, I'm sure.
It was a great learning opportunity. Essentially, what my role was to consult with the top advisors in the Midwest and Colorado. So I got exposed to the way that different advisors practice, a whole number of different firms. And we talked about risks and opportunities, and it's something I was able to take back to financial advising when I decided to restart a practice.
Okay, so you were there for how long with this large firm?
I was there for 5 years.
5 years, that's a decent amount of time to learn the ins and outs of what they're involved with. And during that time you thought, hey, I want to go and start another firm again? So
there were, I guess, two aspects of it. One, I was living in Manhattan and I was on a plane every week.
Traveling
constantly. I'd like to start a family. I don't think that doing that from a plane is really the best personal choice for me.
Yeah.
The other aspect is I miss the client interaction. When you meet with the advisor or whoever their analyst is and you're talking about risks and opportunities in the market, it's dynamic and interesting, but you don't get to see people retire and you don't get to see people send their kids to college or follow through on an estate plan, charitable giving that makes them happy. You don't see the joy that it brings to them.
You really like that personal touch.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. So you kind of had that in the back of your mind, and when was it during the 5 years that you kind of decided need to go back to what your heart's telling you?
Yeah, so I saw a number of rounds of restructuring throughout the company that I was consulting with. As you can imagine with publicly traded companies, there's constant change. But I wanted to be strategic about the way I came back into it, and actually was reaching out to advisors in Vermont to say, hey, are you retiring? Are you looking to sell part of your practice?
That's usually how it works, is people retire and pass it on to somebody?
Well, or you can start from scratch, and I did that once and decided that I didn't want to do that again, and had people that said yes. My partner's retiring. We'd like to have somebody come in to take on his role. And they were lovely people. I just ultimately never felt comfortable enough to sign on the dotted line, because how well do you get to know somebody through 6 meetings, and you're going to be there day in and day out with this person for the foreseeable future.
It'll be your new business partner, right?
Exactly.
That's a lot of risk.
It was a lot of risk, and so I really put it on the back burner. My uncle was a client of the advisor's office that I ended up taking over, and I actually just went with him to his meeting to make sure she was doing all the right things for him. And she was lovely, and it turned out she was trying to retire. So it was serendipitous.
Very serendipitous.
And I end up living 10 minutes away from my mother now. So
what's better than that?
Exactly.
Family is very important. And what do you think? You said you went to the meeting to make sure the right things were getting done. Are you able to share a couple what some of these right things were that were getting done?
I think what it really comes down to is, does she understand what's important to him? At the end of the day, that's one of the first questions I'm going to ask my clients. Why are we here today? What are your goals? Mm-hmm. Because if we don't know that, and we don't know how comfortable they are with the markets, it's really hard to create a plan that, one, we can implement, and two, that they can stick to.
I love that. The first, kind of like Stephen Covey, seek first to understand. Why are they there? What do they want to do?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's the main thing.
At the end of the day, you want to make sure that money's only good for what you can spend it on. And if she understood that was important, and then there's some of the higher level things that from my consulting practice that I had taken, and wanted to make sure that she was doing the right things, and she was.
Mm-hmm. And I like how you say that for some of your clients or some of the people you work with, that there's an element of the charitable donation. So it's not just building wealth for themselves, but also how they can use this money as a vehicle to maybe enact positive good on the community.
Absolutely. And it's very individual to individual. And that's why we ask those questions right off the bat, to understand, are you charitably inclined?
And there might be a lot of potential opportunities with that tax incentives, other things that encourage people to do that. But right now you took over this practice thanks to your uncle being the client there and having that connection. And how long has that been for you now?
Just shy of a year.
Just shy of a year. And what's your barometer right now? How's it looking a year in?
Well, it's an interesting time to take over a business. We've had the worst year in the market that we've had since the financial crisis. So
the worst year since the financial crisis. Wow.
So that it's been a rewarding time as well, because I think it's really easy to be a financial advisor in an up market. In a down market,
everyone's making money.
In a down market, you can show a lot more value. So at this point, we're comfortable with the clients who have come in, and I think we've started to build good relationships. But she'd been there for over a decade, and there's a lot of trust that comes over a decade, and it's something that builds with time, and you can't expect that to come with the snap of your fingers.
Definitely. And how does it work with a lot of her previous customers? They were able to stay with you. That trust is able to kind of be translated?
Absolutely. You try and make sure that there's a transition plan in place that makes them comfortable. So she's still technically on. We've got another year and change for her to be employed there, and make sure it's a smooth transition for the clients that are there.
Mm-hmm. That helps the transition a lot. And I'm impressed too. I first saw you, I think you were advertising in the Norwich Bulletin or one of the local newspapers, and you're really working hard to get your name and profile out there of what you can provide as value to people in the community, right?
Absolutely. When it came down to it, I wanted to make sure that people knew that I was there, that at least there was some exposure to me. Was able to advertise something that, hey, maybe it's not a revenue driver, but it's something that's important. When we think about financial plan, other pieces are things like integrating with cash flow. It's important to the financial plan. If you don't have an emergency savings, your retirement plan can go off track really quickly if you need a new roof.
Yeah, definitely. And we talk about minimum wage, and maybe there should be a maximum wage too, just for the imbalances of what our economy has right now. But I'd love to hear your thoughts a little bit on people, maybe they're working 1 or 2 jobs and just trying to scrape by to get through. I know you can't provide specific financial advice, but for some of these people that, minimum wage job is really tough to have enough to get by, what thoughts or ideas do you have for some of these people, or even for our community, of providing more financial independence?
I think the biggest piece is understanding what you have and understanding what's what's coming in and what's going out. So the B word, budget, can be really important. It's never fun to put together a budget, but if you understand what you're spending, you have a better ability to be able to save. And when you are creating a savings plan, you want it to be something you can stick to. Part of it's about what you can accumulate and what you can grow, but starting those habits. So if we're talking about $5 a month, $10 a month in that situation, maybe it'll add up to a large number. Maybe you'll need to use it for emergency savings, but regardless, you're building that habit so that when your life situation does change, you've already built that into it.
And to what you started off saying with your own path in this career profession is that a lot of our education, we learn about biology and chemistry and all these other sciences and math, but the most important thing of kind of having this financial independence and wealth, we don't teach that so much in school, is my understanding.
At least when I was going to school, I don't think we had an accounting class. We didn't, basic balancing a checkbook was, I believe, not part of our curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to things like the time value of money and how the market doesn't go in a straight line up, it's very bumpy, and what it means to be a long-term investor and things like compounding, and just if we were to try to boil that down to a really high-level understanding, that's a big piece of it, and that's why being regimented in your planning process and creating a plan you can stick to is kind of the be-all, end-all goal.
Yeah, definitely. And I was just seeing a post on Instagram of some CPA who was starting his child off early, I don't know, $20 a month, trying to put that into an IRA, just to promote the idea of, hey, if you start early, there's compounding interest year after year, the money will grow. I was super lucky that my mother grew up down the street from Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway. So I always heard the stories of Berkshire Hathaway, and there was a funny post recently that if Buffett saved money and didn't spend the $39,000 on his house, this was something like 50 years ago, he's still in the same house in Omaha, Nebraska. If he saved money and just slept on Charlie Munger, his partner's couch during that time, and invested it into Berkshire Hathaway, it'd be something like $3.9 billion right now. So,
absolutely. It's if we think about one of the best quotes from him, at least in my opinion, is that the market is a great vehicle, and I'm paraphrasing here, for transferring wealth from the impatient to the patient. It's about time in the market. There's a lot of adages that have probably been oversaid, but they're true. If we even to put the recent year and a half in perspective, we're really just back to where we were at the beginning of 2021. The market today is a little bit higher than it was right before the pandemic.
Which is phenomenal to think, yeah. I mean, the patience element is huge. Thinking, hey, maybe today I can sacrifice, I'm not going to spend the $8 on my Starbucks, no offense to Starbucks and people who love that, but maybe I'll take that $8 and dedicate it towards my IRA, and over the course of a year, that's already $100 that you have. And that's kind of the foundational element of starting to build something that you can save and build some kind of a nest egg.
Absolutely. Even if we think about the financial crisis in 2008, it was the worst economic event that most people have seen unless they were alive for the Great Depression. March 9th was the lowest the market got. The S&P 500 closed at 676 that day. Right now, it's over 4,000, 4,100-ish. That's about 6 times higher.
Unbelievable.
If you invested when it felt the worst, you'd have 6 times the amount of money if you just didn't touch it.
That's unbelievable. Yeah, and thinking about people who are earning minimum wage or earning lower wages than what they really deserve or should be earning, the way to, I feel, really grow that wealth is by making it 6x your money. If you put it in the bank, most of the time you're getting, 1% interest. Right now the interest rates are maybe a little bit better in savings accounts, but you're basically losing money due to inflation, is my understanding. But
absolutely.
If you want to grow some kind of amount, you need to try and take some risk in the market, is kind of what it seems like.
And everybody has a different risk tolerance, so the amount of risk that one person is willing to take and can take, also based on how old they are and when they're going to need the money, it varies. But frankly, the savings interest is typically and almost always going to be lower than the inflation rate. We've had the highest inflation that we've seen in 40 years this past year, and was a big driver for market performance.
Mm-hmm. I guess luckily, though, it feels the inflation is maybe coming under control a little bit. It's hard to tell, though, when you're going to the grocery store and you get 5 things and it costs about $100.
Absolutely. So inflation is getting under control. If we look back to June, inflation was at about 9%, and the numbers that came in for March, about 5%. So it's come down drastically. The issue is that when we think about inflation, it's the rate of change. So we're unlikely to see prices go down. It's the new floor. So when we say inflation's gone from 9% to 5%, it means it's increasing at a rate of 5% instead of a rate of 9%. To really see prices go down, we have to see deflation. What we usually, when people talk about inflation coming down, what that really is, it's disinflation. The rate of change is getting slower.
Interesting. And deflation, my understanding too, is quite dangerous with the times in Japan when it almost went into deflation. That's what a lot of economists try to avoid. Is that right?
Absolutely, and it's something that is pretty atypical for markets. You don't see it happen very often. I believe, and I could be incorrect on this, that after the Great Depression is the only time that we've seen it in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and maybe shifting topics a little bit,
Yeah.
I'm curious how this community, I know you said mom's down the street and you have uncle, maybe some relatives in the area. How's this community been for starting your new business? How supportive have you felt from that side?
It's been wonderful. Everybody that I've taken on as a client or that's transitioned to me as a client has been really welcoming, and the recommendations in terms of, hey, here's a good place to eat or a good place to shop has made the transition here very smooth. My fiance lives in Oregon for the next week, and she's going to be moving here, so we feel very excited to be starting this next chapter of our lives in southeastern Connecticut.
That's great. It's a beautiful area, and I know EB is doing thousands of new hires there, so we have Pfizer here and maybe a few other companies to try and build a local economy. How do you feel about the local economy so far?
Well, looking at Niantic and down the road from where my office is, there has been a lot of development that's happened, and it looks to me, just based on the infrastructure and the amount of new businesses that are going in, that the economy is in really good shape. I know that there's a lot of people who are hurting as a result of the economy in general right now and the inflation that we have seen and what that's done for jobs, but overall, southeastern Connecticut seems to be booming. Even looking at the housing market, we know that housing prices peaked for the country about last year. That doesn't seem to be the case here quite as much.
Yeah, and thanks to stellar education throughout the region, we're lucky that the real estate prices do have a little bit of an elevated level or advantage thanks to that. And I know we don't want to put other people down at all, but I'm just curious, there's many choices for people out in the community to work with John or Joe or Jesse maybe in regards to how they want to plan their financials moving forward. I'm curious what you can say or what you want to share with some of our viewers. Why would someone want to work with Jesse? What are some advantages or strengths? Not to put you on the spot at all.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously you're very knowledgeable and trustworthy.
I think that when you're looking for a financial advisor, the questions that you have to answer are, does this person understand me? Do I trust them? And do they seem like they know what they're doing? There's obviously an information gap there that makes that third piece a little bit trickier. But I think that the firm somebody works for is a little bit less important than what their knowledge base is and that they understand what your goals are. When I consulted with nearly every brokerage firm that exists. I've seen good advisors and bad advisors from every firm. So I think making sure that you understand what the advisor's background is and that they understand what your background is kind of the key to determining who you want to work with.
So it's more the person as opposed to the firm or the brand that they have that they're working with.
I would say that that's overwhelmingly true. Every firm has their pros and cons.
Yep. And in terms of costs and cost advantages, they're all plus or minus pretty similar in that realm as well?
You can see costs vary, and that can also vary within a firm.
Mm-hmm.
The big difference, especially if we look at it throughout the past year, is do you want a full service financial advisor that's going to sit down and create financial plans? You're generally going to pay a little bit more for that, or do you want to be a do-it-yourself investor? And you can put together your plans, and maybe you can find a planner that can do that for you and give you a plan, but you'll implement it.
What do you see that most people prefer? They like to have the financial planner help them throughout this process, right?
Well,
Depends.
I'm a full-service financial advisor, so typically that's the type of client that would come to me.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a do-it-yourself investor, I'm probably not the right fit for you. So it's a little bit tough to answer that question.
And a lot of people you're working with, I imagine, are through referrals or people happy with your service, right? Do you know about what percentage of people you work with is doing that?
I think the majority is through either client referrals or part of the financial planning process is we want to make sure we partner with the other professionals that are important to you. So is that your accountant? Is that your attorney? And in working with those individuals, you end up seeing referrals through those sources as well.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And I always think that it's amazing. I was just talking with Anytime Fitness, as the gym I belong to in Niantic, and over the years they've done a phenomenal job of being really active in the community and doing a lot of great things above and beyond what a typical business maybe in some people's mind might do. And I thought for financial planning that, I'm not sure if the schools still do it now, but the stock market game and really trying to encourage this level of knowledge and wisdom to share it and pass it along to the next generation of people. And then meanwhile, that might trickle down and have new clients and opportunities for you. Have you tried, I know it's still early, just the first year, but have you tried to get involved in the community and creative elements like that?
I actually have been thinking about it, and our business typically has a cyclicality to it where things slow down a little bit in the summer because people take vacations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the revamp plan, is to see where entry makes sense there. I think that the stock market game that you mentioned is a really good introduction. I think that one of the things that would be helpful is, hey, maybe we do this with freshmen in high school, and we extend it until their senior year, because the tough part is if you're looking at it over a semester, one of the key tenets of investing is long-term investing.
Mm-hmm.
A semester is not long-term. So it gives you a good sense for how the market works, but not necessarily how to build wealth in the market.
Mm-hmm. And even for some of these people, maybe they don't have tons of exposable income to do it with, but coming up with some way to make it feel as real as possible, even if it's just a fake stock market game or fake investing game, to teach that. There's an organization, I think it's the Connecticut Association of Human Services, CHHS, that they have the Connecticut Money School, and that might be another opportunity for you to get involved in, whether it's summertime when it's a little bit slower, volunteer, just to help spread this knowledge and wisdom. And as we continue to teach people along these lines, I'm confident we can help create a more affluent society where people are investing more, saving more. Because I'm not sure, do you know much about the average savings rates for Americans right now?
It's a negative number.
It's a negative number. So what does that mean?
It means that people are taking on debt.
People are spending more than they're earning on average in America.
On average in America.
Wow. And do you know, does this compare with other countries?
I don't know what the comparison is to other countries.
Uh-huh.
My inclination would be to say it's higher. I know that typically the savings rate in Asia is closer to somewhere around 40%.
Wow.
So with us having a negative number, credit card debt at all-time highs, we're kind of behind the eight ball as a country there, I would guess. I don't know what that looks like in Europe and Latin America.
Yeah, I know you focus on the individual, one person at a time, but maybe as a larger macroeconomic view, that's a really interesting landscape if the majority of Americans on average are spending more than they're earning. I mean, I guess credit cards are easy to come by, but once you go down that path, how can you get into another path? It's hard, isn't it?
It's really hard. The two pieces of advice that I'd have there is we need a budget, and we need to try and stick to the budget. And then if we're paying on debts, is there a way that we can pay less on them? Can we consolidate something, or can we just find a way to have a lower interest rate? And taking it one piece at a time. It might take years, but it's one of the largest stressors that Americans have is the debt loads that they carry.
And if we can help to decrease that and have more financial independence, maybe a lot of the stress and these different levels could go down a little bit.
Absolutely.
I think it's cool too that with your father being an accountant, I heard budget maybe 1,000 times. You got to have that budget to work with. And do you have other team members or advisors that kind of help you on your team?
It's myself, and then our branch office administrator, Donna, and the office wouldn't run without her. She is integral.
That's awesome. So it's good you have that teamwork relationship. And then also you mentioned your fiance out in Oregon coming out soon. Are there other hobbies or things that you want to share that you kind of do in the community that obviously you're more than a financial planner. You have your life outside of that.
So we're big outdoors people. We like to hike. I grew up in Vermont. I like to ski.
Nature's good up there.
Mountain biking is one of my favorite pastimes. So I'm a member of New England Mountain Bike Association.
Oh, cool.
And I would like to be a more active member, to be honest with you. But
yeah.
Starting a business has taken up a lot of time.
Yep, that's almost like having a baby here, a family that you have to run, just the business itself.
Yeah, so it'll be fun to add that on too. Adding on a family is one of our goals. So.
That's
or adding
exciting.
on children, I should say.
Cool. So that might be in the near future as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to touch upon on the show here? We just have a couple minutes left.
I think that if there's one thing that I'd want to get across is that investing is a long-term game. And if we're investing for the long term, you want to make sure that you have quality investments. If we're investing in companies, you want them to be around for the long term. And this is something that has been a tenet for investing for a long time. You want it to be diversified. And that doesn't mean just owning multiple different things. You want things that behave differently. And over the long term, that's how you can accumulate wealth. And that's important because that's how you can achieve what your investment goals are. As I said before, money is really only useful for what you can spend it on and the type of life it can provide you.
Yeah, I like how you really emphasized the whole element of patience. That it's easy. Was it March? I forget the date you said.
March 9th of 2009 was the bottom of the financial crisis.
It would be easy to say, hey, the market's low. It's at 600 in SMP or whatever it was. I'm going to sell everything. But if you held on to it, a few years later, you have 6 times your money.
It was a scary time for a lot of folks. We were still in the midst of the deepest recession that almost anybody who was alive had seen. And there were terrible headlines coming out around those times about Japan maybe not being able to pay back their debt, Wells Fargo cutting their dividends, who at the time, they were one of the banks that were buying out other banks. The market didn't go any lower, and nobody has a crystal ball. So the best thing you can do is stick to that plan, and if you're periodically investing, don't stop it because the market feels bad. That's actually usually the best time to be investing.
Cool. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for your time and sharing financial wisdom in the community. So grateful to have you on the show today. Thank you again.
Thank you. Great to be here.